All right, good to go. Got a lot of questions about me and law school and why I went. So while I smoke this cigar, I will just say everything, and I hope I answer every question. I didn't want to go to law school in the first place. After undergrad and grad school, I figured it would be a massive waste of time and money, and what do you know? I was right. My parents really wanted me to go, and the girl I was going out with at the time really wanted me to go. They acted like I was destroying Earth if I didn't, so I went knowing it would be a massive failure, even though I would do everything I was supposed to, and that's exactly what happened. The breaking point, because I tried to like it, I tried to enjoy it, and I did all the work. I wasn't like cutting class or anything. The breaking point was in the third semester. So the first semester of the second year, there was a moot court contest. So that was October of the second year fall semester, and I talked a guy into being my partner who I didn't really talk to him all that much, but I wanted to win. And we were probably the only ones who actually had a strategy. Other people were probably trying to, like, I don't know, just like say the fanciest things, get the law correct, be a little persuasive. We read the rubric, how the judges had to score us, and we just wanted to maximize our points. And there was actually a ton of points available for just showing that you knew what the law was, what the issue was, and not really that many points in persuading anyone or saying something fancy or saying something that no one else like thought of. Just showing you had really read over the relevant cases and proving you knew the judgments and how they related to the issue, that was like 2/3 of the points. So we really just wanted to show that we understood what the issue was, and we didn't care so much about persuasion. Well, we won the first round, and by the way, I'll tell you that just like how Matt Damon in Rounders is late because he played poker all night, before round 1 and before round 2, even though they were weeknights, school nights, I drove 55 miles each way to the Horseshoe Council Bluffs to play poker, because if I'm ever in a moot court contest in my life, I'm playing poker the night before like Matt Damon did. So we won the first round, and we should have won the second round. In the second round, there was a point where someone on the other team said something that was just wrong, and I leaned over and whispered to my partner, they can't possibly win. What she said is wrong. We each had like different issues. So he didn't really know about my issue so much, I didn't know about his. We would both stand up there for like 10 minutes or 15 minutes and field questions from the judges. So I leaned over and told him, because he wasn't familiar with what my issue was, and the girl on the other team, that was the same issue. It was like kind of me versus her, and my partner versus her partner. So I said, she just got that wrong. She doesn't understand what the law is for this issue. She can't possibly win. And they won. And they won because the judges just ignored the rubric and just made up whatever they wanted. And they just, it was just such a scam. I know exactly what went on. We finished, we left the room, they talked to themselves while they filled out the score sheets, and I know they must have said, well, first, that team won, and let's just make sure we award them enough points. There is no way, if you followed that rubric, the other team got more points than me and my partner got. My partner wasn't as mad as I was. He was mad that we didn't win. He wasn't mad that like law made no sense and it was just a futile process being in law school. It was funny because we took different approaches to prepping. Law school is a lot of work anyway, and we had this contest on top of it. I basically chose to stay up to date with my classwork and just sleep like 2 to 3 hours a day for 2.5 weeks. He chose to fall way behind in his classwork, and he was telling professors, don't call on me. I'm in this contest, I'm prepping for it. After it's done, I'll catch up on everything. But don't call on me in class in the meantime, because I'm not doing the classwork. So it was a sacrifice for both of us, and we lost because the judges just made up whatever they wanted. And I talked to the guy, the student like in charge of the contest afterwards, and he said there's no way to know. It's impossible for anyone on earth to know what the law actually is, so I'm wrong to say that the girl on the other team got the law wrong. And I said, well, if no one on earth can say how it what it is, whether anyone said something correct or incorrect, how are you awarding 2/3 of the points? Like, It can't be 2/3 of total points if no one on earth could say who's right and who's wrong, and he didn't have an answer. And I tried the next year to actually fix the rubric. I told the professor in charge I was willing to make a new rubric, one that actually made sense, and one that the judges were probably going to follow anyway when they saw what they had and ignored it. And the new student in charge at the time just like didn't want that to happen. I guess it would have been like a tiny amount of work for him, and he just said just leave it, and he wasn't going to do anything. So that was actually a microcosm of law school and law in general. It doesn't matter if you're better or if you're right. Someone with the authority is just going to make up whatever he or she wants, and you're going to get screwed. Before I decided to not be a lawyer, I still went on a lot of interviews for internships. I got the feeling that, at least in Nebraska, they cared more about turnover than actually hiring good lawyers, because my resume had my home address in New York, I guess, or it had my undergrad in New York. It had grad school in Wisconsin. I was living in Nebraska at the time. It had either UPS or poker or both on the resume in Vegas. So it showed that I moved around a lot, and I got the sense that they just wanted someone who was going to live in Lincoln his or her entire life, and they were never going to have to rehire anybody. They didn't think I would like stay more than a year or two if they hired me. Yeah, there just weren't, I mean, people way stupider than me. For one, you could just talk to someone and understand how stupid they are. You could also listen when they're answering questions in class and understand how much they're failing to grasp the concepts and how poor they would be at persuading anyone. I was always more into trial stuff than business stuff. Once we got to choose our classes, I took way more of the trial stuff, like all the trial stuff, and none of the M&A stuff, none of the tax classes. So I don't know in that realm if I would have been good or poor, or, I mean, I would have been fine. I don't know if I would have been the best. Trial stuff, there was no one better than me in that class. And no one cared. No one really cared after high school, after college, or after grad school either. When I'm doing things, the one thing I have going for me is that I'm better than the other people doing it. And in school, there was just no one who ever cared. So law school was the third time, and after that moot court contest, I was finishing. I knew I would finish all 3 years, but I wasn't going to take the bar, and I wasn't going to be a lawyer. Classes were interesting, which is one of the reasons I wasn't just going to drop out. We had one professor from Boston. It's very rare to teach where you went to law school, so you have a lot of professors from other law schools, of course, but like nearby, a lot in the Midwest. Well, this guy was from Boston, and he loved the Red Sox, and he loved talking about baseball and the Red Sox. And for one, not a ton of people were following baseball in my class. Also, you're not gonna know like real hardcore like Red Sox Yankees information if you lived your whole life in Lincoln or the surrounding area. There was one time he said, so if you do follow baseball, you remember in 03, the ALCS, Yankees Red Sox, Pedro had a lead, he wasn't doing well. Grady Little, the manager, went out to the mound. Everyone thought he was taking Pedro out and putting in a relief pitcher, and it was just a conversation on the mound. And Grady Little came back to the dugout, left Pedro in, and the Red Sox lost the lead instantly and then lost the series. There was a time that professor said something about a surprise. He's like, yeah, I mean, it's not like I've never been surprised in my life. I mean, I remember in 03 when Grady Little didn't take him out. It was so subtle. I think I'm the only person in the room who even knew he was talking about baseball when he said that. Definitely no one knew who Grady Little was or who the pitcher he was about to take out was without the guy saying it. So class was real interesting. It wasn't just that professor, but a lot of the professors were interesting. We also had a professor who worked in the Defense Department when Bush was president and Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense. So he was real knowledgeable, also interesting. So classes were actually enjoyable. So I finished the 3 years, but stopped interviewing and didn't do any of the steps to like apply for. And there's like a lot of things you have to do before you like actually walk in and take the bar exam. I didn't do any of those things. I was finishing the 3 years, but I wasn't going to be a lawyer. If you want to know my areas of interest, one was environmental, which I guess on a very large scale it helps if you're a lawyer. There's a lot of small things you can do on your own, like having a law background, having your license is unnecessary for doing environmental things. It's not a ton, but I started a leaf mold pile in my parents' backyard. I have no idea where the bags of leaves on the curb actually wind up, but in their backyard now, we're turning it into mulch. I almost never use plastic bags if I could help it. Even when I get my voucher drinks, I just carry it. Even sometimes that means carrying 4 in my hands up to my car. Just never want to use the plastic bags. There are other things I do, but it would be nice if we could get everyone doing them, and everyone doing something small adds up. You don't need to be a lawyer to do that. My second area of interest, because of that professor who worked in the Defense Department, was like national security. Took some very interesting classes on national security, cyber security, space law, also like a war crimes class. Some things that really are necessary out there. Learned some interesting things about cruises. It seems to be very, very easy to get away with some really malicious things on cruises if you know what laws are governing you. It wasn't that bad. So whether I was in law school or playing poker, I would have the expenses of a person living indoors. That didn't change. The two big things were, one, less income than I would have had playing poker. That's what hurt me those years. I played some poker. Actually 2019 was the most hours at the time I ever played, because I went crazy on the weekends and over the summer. But I still would have gotten more hours in had I only been playing poker. So I had less income, for one. I also had to pay for law school related things. Now I did get a pretty big scholarship, so the main thing that matters is your LSAT score when you apply, and that determines how much scholarship money they're going to give you. Your undergrad institution matters a little, your experience matters a little, GPA barely matters. The LSAT score is the big one. I'm very good at taking tests. I beat my brother in your face, not that he watches the videos or knows they exist. I also beat his friend who went Ivy League undergrad, Northwestern law, and instantly got a job paying 150 grand like the day after law school ended. So beat both of them on the LSAT in their face, and I got 90 grand over 3 years in scholarship money. It didn't quite cover everything, because for an out-of-state person, it's pretty high tuition. I probably had to pay around 20,000 over the 3 years above what the scholarship money handled. And I'm not paranoid, this happens all the time. People try to scam other people out of money all the time. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln twice tried not to give me all of my scholarship money. Once, I didn't notice in time, and I couldn't do anything about it. I realized, but it was too late to rectify it. Once I realized as it was happening and got my money back. And my suspicion, along with this, and at the YMCA, and at UPS locations, and when I worked for Revolution Prep, is that they try to do this to everybody. It can't just be me. It can't just be this happening to me 10 times in my life. It's probably that this happens to everybody, and a lot of people don't know how to check if they're getting conned or stolen from. A lot of people would like to check, but don't know exactly what to look at, and don't know all the regulations. I'm very good at checking all of these things, and people still try to scam me out of money all the time. So the interesting thing is that I think most people would say, yeah, it wasn't too bad. With no scholarship money, it would have been way, way worse. No, with no scholarship money, it would have been better. Without any scholarship money, it just would have been so much. I would go into an amount of debt that would be impossible to ever get out of, and I just wouldn't have went. It was actually too inexpensive that I decided to go, and it hurt me. The same thing with grad school, actually. Grad school was so inexpensive. It was like 7 grand for that 1 year program, even though it was like a top 5 actuarial science program in the country. Top 5, top 10 or something. It was still very inexpensive. and I actually wish now it were more expensive and I wouldn't have done it. So the money wasn't awful, and especially after I decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I was going to still go to class and do all the work, but I wasn't going to take the bar or apply to full-time positions. I played a lot. So 2019 I played over 1,700 hours, which was the most at the time. And then my final semester, so spring semester 2020, leading up to Corona, but that semester I had taken a little more than the average amount of credits along the way, and this was my semester with the least amount of credits, so I had more time than any other semester, in addition to not needing to do all those things to prep for the bar exam or for applying to jobs or going on interviews. I was playing like 40-50 hour weekends at the Horseshoe Council Bluffs a lot in January and February. So it didn't destroy me financially. I was into the trial stuff, not the business side, because being from the tri-state area is such a step up on arguing and persuading and all the skills you'll need to be a trial lawyer. You can't be taught that stuff. Law school didn't teach any of that in the least. In that moot court contest, in other like in-class demonstrations, it was like sad what some of the other students would say in their attempts to be argumentative. So I just want to represent the Northeast. And I mentioned this earlier, this was another thing I did in my life where being better than other people didn't matter. It didn't matter in any job. It just seemed like the people who were there the longest got paid the most. I would like the people who were the best to be paid the most. It didn't matter in a lot of the teams I played on in high school. It didn't matter in academics. Poker, it matters. Now there are still outliers. You could run better than you're supposed to forever. You could run worse than you're supposed to forever. But mostly, like, there are no bosses here determining who gets paid. The better players get paid more. The people who play more hours get paid more. The people who understand Vegas has a ton of promotions, how to use them to your advantage, they get paid more. Poker is quite the meritocracy. You're actually ending up with more money if you're better than other people, and there are a ton of fields where that is not the case. And one last thing I want to say, in addition to not liking the structure of law school and how it went, law specifically, that field, to me, it is, to rely on the law is a terrible idea. It is a very expensive, very time-consuming last resort to any issue. There are ways to avoid issues that would lead to you going to your last case scenario, which is, let's go to court. There are so many ways to avoid it, not just on TV, as much Judge Judy as my dad watches, and all those problems could be avoided if people were just a little more polite and had a little more forethought. There are so many ways to avoid those problems. In law school, the cases, had to read hundreds of cases. There are so many ways to avoid needing the law to result in the proper outcome that benefits you. So now, things in my life, I just try to avoid them the best I can. One example is security deposits. I have never in my life left an apartment worse than I found it, and every time the landlords just make up nonsense and keep 3/4 of the security deposit. Yes, I could take all the pictures and go to court, and I should win. I don't know if I would, and even if I did, it would take a lot of time and some money to actually file the case and have the case happen. And now I live in a way where I just avoid it. I don't pay security deposits, and I'm never going to pay one as long as I live. The incidentals, when I stay at Paris, I don't care. For a few days, there's a $100 hold on my credit card, and then it disappears. I've never had a problem with that. And that's one thing I've had a problem with, and now I just avoid it altogether. So that's one reason I don't like law, and I'll probably never recommend it to someone who's thinking about it. So that's it. That's how I went, why I went, why I stopped, my areas of interest, the finances. I think that covered every question. And remember, rice is a spoon food.